Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The July 1st weekend brought two statues of British monarchs down at the legislature in Winnipeg, and one queen lost her head. APTN's Michelle Karlenzig has more on the Canada Day marches around the city.
Thousands of people across the nation marched in solidarity with the Indigenous community this past Canada Day weekend. Some people were marching in support of Indian residential school survivors, and others were there to cancel Canada Day. The events here in Winnipeg ended with two Queen statues toppled over to the ground and one of them headless. The marches started at Portage in Maine, with the first event organized by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs marching down Portage Avenue and ending at Peguis First Nation Urban Reserve. The other march ended here at the Manitoba Legislative Grounds and had people toppling over the statue with ropes and covering the base of the statue with red handprints. In a statement online, Grand Chief Arlen Dumas said that he was happy to see so many people come out for the Indigenous community. He said he doesn't condone the behavior of toppling statues. However, it acts as a symbol of anger and hurt in the Indigenous community. What's left behind me after the weekend is finished is orange t-shirts and flags and children's shoes. The Winnipeg Police Service say they're investigating the events that happened last Thursday, and no further details have been released. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
In Prince Rupert, British Columbia, hundreds marched to honor residential school survivors. The July 1st afternoon was filled with powerful songs and dance performances. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
A sea of orange was outside the courthouse in Prince Rupert. A powerful display of drumming, singing, with many holding up signs to honor residential school survivors. Northwest dance group leaders, carvers, and medicine workers arranged the event. Leanna Spence, Alaska-Willam's artist, was one of the organizers. She said the day was meant to help the community heal.
So this day is about mourning all the mass graves that they're finding every day and honoring and thanking our survivors that made it possible for people like me to be here and everybody else.
Gwissa Whale is a house leader of the APTN Nation. He shared that since the unmarked grave discoveries became public, his community has been hurting.
You know, when you hear words like get over it, well, how do you get over something like that? People ripping your children from you and stealing them, and then not only stealing that, but stealing your land at the same time and taking your identity to what we are now. So yeah, it's pretty hurtful what has happened.
A local motorbike club, dance groups, and elders led the way as Indigenous and non-Indigenous marched through Prince Rupert.
Singing really brought so much healing, but for us, like coming out of COVID and being, you know, on lockdown for pretty much almost like over a year, we needed this. We needed our drums, we needed our rattles and our medicine and our song and our dance. We need our culture because that's the only way out of healing.
Outside the courthouse, a memorial display with children's shoes, toys, and orange flowers. Police cars blocked traffic for the group to walk to the waterfront. The message was reconciliation and the need for more action from the government in Canada and religious leaders.
Yeah, I think the government should step up to the plate. I think the Pope should step up to the plate and release the records that need to be released so that people can put it to rest. Like to hide it under certain places. I mean, what is that saying? You know, come clean.
Organizers say they are working towards making Canada Day in Prince Rupert an annual cultural event where people can gather to celebrate.
If people could travel here for the All-Native Basketball Tournament and spend thousands of dollars on watching these young men play basketball, imagine how much people would travel here for dance, like masked dancers and drummers and singers of all ages. This could be something for everybody.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Prince Rupert.
Yellowknifers turned out in the hundreds this July 1st to honor children who died in residential school. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs has that story.
Orange replaced red, and marches took the spot of canceled parades. Hundreds gathered in downtown Yellowknife July 1st to honor those who attended residential school
Stacy Siye. My name is Stacy Sudberg. Welcome to Chief Dragoon's territory.
The event was co-organized by the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation and the city.
To honor all our Indigenous people who are still with us today here on Earth, and for our ancestors who passed.
Leaders such as Liberal MP Michael McLeod addressed the crowd on a personal level.
As an individual who attended residential school, and I see so many people here that I know attended residential schools, and as a person that grew up in a community that had a residential school and spent my lifetime listening to the stories, the horror stories about what happened to the children in that facilities and others across this country, I know that we can't let this atrocity fade from our memories.
The day was about acknowledging Indigenous peoples with prayer songs and a feeding of the fire.
I'm one of those people who was taken at 8 years old.
And for residential school survivor Paul Andrew, July 1st came with calls for accountability.
But what I ask Canadian governments and the churches, make it easier so we can forgive you. Let us forgive you. Give us that opportunity to forgive you. You make it so hard to forgive you. Don't do that anymore.
In the early hours of July 1st, RCMP responded to what they have called a suspicious fire at the Catholic Church in Yellowknife, something Andrew touched on directly.
This is not Indigenous. This is not traditional cultural activity, and we cannot allow it to happen, and I'm going to urge all the leaders to say that publicly and loudly without any apology or without any kind of reservations whatsoever, to make it really clear that our reconciliation is not about violence.
While there was mourning this July 1st, there was also healing. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. Residents of the Lytton First Nation in British Columbia fled their homes last week after a fire destroyed 90% of the nearby village of Lytton. Temperatures at the time were over 49 degrees. Some leaders criticized the BC government's response to the fire, saying they had to arrange evacuation centers themselves. This week, officials stated the Lytton blaze was likely started inside the small village and was not part of the over 200 wildfires currently burning in the province. Lytton First Nation members have fled to nearby shelters, including one being hosted by the Stahelis Nation.
ALIS is willing to support as long as needed. So we got direction from our chief and council to support the people the best way we can.
We have to take a short break, but still to come, the developer at the center of 1492 Landback Lane is shutting down the project. Welcome back. The housing development at the center of the 1492 Landback Lane camp will not move forward. Foxgate Developments was building a housing subdivision called Mackenzie Meadows near Caledonia, Ontario. But a group of Six Nations land defenders took over the site just about a year ago, changing the name to 1492 Landback Lane. They say the land is unceded Haudenosaunee territory and set up a permanent camp. Skylar Williams called the company's backdown a win. He joins us now. Skylar, thanks so much for joining us. What does this victory mean to the people at the camp?
You know what, it's been a long time coming, over a year, almost a year now, and you know, to be celebrating these incremental wins when we get a chance to is, you know, it's vitally important to I don't care what movement you're doing, but these, you know, like this is certainly just the foot of the mountain in terms of what the the work that needs to be done. You know, this is a generational struggle. You know, like this is something that my parents fought for, and their parents before them, and you know that like they did this work so that we could at least have an argument today. You know, and I hope to at least be able to do that for my children and my grandchildren, so that there's an argument for them to make when it is their turn to make these similar stands.
And did you ever imagine that you would in fact stop this?
I never had a doubt in my mind.
So tell us a little bit about how you are celebrating this win.
Say that again?
Tell us about how you're celebrating, how you and everybody at the camp is celebrating this.
Well, you know what? Celebrating that with family and friends on Saturday, we had an amazing lineup of every who's who of Six Nations artists that came out to sing and play music for us at Landback Lane. And you know, we had every Juno winner from, you know, Derek Miller and Logan Stotts and Jace Martin, Blaine Bumbry, Burl LaForme, Tom Wilson from Junk House. Like, all of these people came out to Landback Lane. So like several of them have been arrested for coming down last summer to play their music. You know, and so to see them guys all back out, to see them doing that, certainly, and again, like, we needed this at this moment, you know, like with all of the recent tragedy around the residential school stuff, it was an amazing gift to be able to have something to celebrate in those moments.
So what do you think this victory says about how direct action can affect Indigenous land rights?
You know what, I hope that that this win can reverberate through certainly in our community to the next generations, but also across all of Turtle Island, to say that, you know what, if we fight and we make a stand, and we can do that as peacefully as we possibly can, and stand in the face, like, to put yourself in harm's way, to be able to make that stand for them future generations. You know what, we can fight and we can win.
And what's the message for other land defenders in Canada?
You know what, it takes it takes a lot of sacrifice. You know, it takes a lot of time, and I don't think people understand quite how heavy a burden it is to be on the land in the way that we have, with, you know, constantly with police surrounding us, with, you know, in days when rubber bullets are flying past your ears and pulling taser darts out of people's backs. Like those days are, you know, all of this spending, what, $20 million for policing, you know, 20 to 50 people sat around a fire singing Kumbaya is an absolutely ridiculous sentiment to me.
All right, Skylar, that's all the questions we have for you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We reached out to the development company but had not heard back by airtime. The AFN kicks off their annual General Assembly this week. In addition to electing a national chief, delegates debate and vote on motions, and 2 small First Nations communities from Canada's smallest province are looking for much larger representation. APTN's Kent Driscoll explains.
There are just over 1,500 First Nation people on Prince Edward Island, the Lennox Island and Abegwit First Nations. Now the 2 nations want PEI to have their own AFN regional chief. Right now, they're rolled in with New Brunswick. Why do the few people of PEI need that level of representation? Lennox Island Chief Darlene Bernard explains.
Yes, we need to have our own voice. We're a full province, and right now we are a part of the New Brunswick PEI regional chiefs area, I guess. But at the end of the day, PEI, like, we are the First Nations, we're the Abegwetnoa, right? So we need to have our own voice at the table, because the AFN is a national table, and our voices need to be at the national table.
At the last AFN General Assembly, delegates voted to review the idea of PEI getting a regional chief. Now it's in front of the virtual delegates. For Bernard, the PEI First Nations have their own unique needs.
Prince Edward Island's always been lumped in with New Brunswick. For many years, we were a part of their tribal council, right? So the St. John River Valley Tribal Council. And way back in the day, when I first became chief, it became very apparent to me that, they have a different agenda. New Brunswick has a different agenda.
Her biggest challenge in getting the motion passed? Why does a region with so few people deserve a bigger voice?
That as a chief on PEI, one of only two, we can't be left behind, because you know what happens every time I go to meetings and in the past and stuff, hey, PEI is here, we're here, because they'll be saying, oh, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Toronto, all those places, but no, they protect PEI, and I'm like, excuse me, PEI is here, we're here, and it's sad. We shouldn't have to be an afterthought.
PEI First Nations will find out this week at the AFN General Assembly whether their motion will pass or not. For 2 First Nations in Canada's smallest province, if it does, it will be huge. Ken Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
And the election for National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is just 2 days away. 7 candidates are running, and with national attention focused on unmarked graves at former residential schools, the winner will have to confront the past and work towards the future. Bruce Spence is one of our producers. He's covered AFN and National Indian Brotherhood events since the late 1970s. He joins us now. Bruce, thanks for joining us. What is going to be the biggest challenge for the new national chief?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is closing the credibility gap that the Assembly has with band members. There's a huge gap between the leadership of the Assembly of First Nations and average band members, in urban areas and on reserve. And I think that whoever gets in as national chief is going to have to close that gap. Tell people that, there's a new national chief in town, and I am going to bring you people out of unemployment. I'm going to bring you people out of poverty. I'm going to try and get something done on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. I'm going to try and get something done with the suicides and erase that credibility gap. And the same for federal government and provincial government and big business. National chief is going to have to impress on the other people in this country, sharing this country with us. There's a new national chief in town. You're going to have to stop exploiting our natural resources without our consent. You're going to have to improve our drinking water supply. You're going to have to do all of these things that need to be done, and we are here to tell you to do it, and you better be used to that.
And now the big question, who's going to win this election?
That's a very good question, Daryl. I think it's a toss-up between Roseanne Archibald and Alvin Fiddler. We do have 3 of the 7 are women. We've got Kathy Martin from Listagouche and Jody Calahoo Stonehouse from the Michelle First Nation in Northern Alberta. We've got Reginald Belrose from Saskatchewan, Lee Crowchild from Alberta, and Kevin Hart from Manitoba. They're all very good candidates, but I think when it comes right down to the brass tacks, it's up between Archibald and Fiddler.
And Bruce, should one of these women win, just how truly significant would that be?
I think that would be very significant because it would show that the AFN is open to change, and they're not going to be happy just sticking with the old boys club, which it has been. It would be the first time in the history of the organization that a woman was elected. There have been few that have run before. One, Wendy Grant John, even came very close to toppling Phil Fontaine back in Vancouver 15, 16 years ago. But this would be a first, and I think that would be a very significant thing. And I think it would tell the women in our communities and Canadians in general that, oh, there's a woman here now. Things are going to be different. Women have different priorities. They have different methods of doing it. And I think it would be a very significant and important development if that did happen.
And Bruce, you've covered these elections for decades. What's new about this one?
Well, of course, the pandemic has had an impact on it. It's forced the organization to go virtual. So whoever gets the 60% plus one votes needed to win the election has to do it by going online to meetings. There's no more the personal in-person stuff, you know, the backroom dealing that goes on at the assemblies when they're held in a big expensive hotel in some exotic city like Calgary or Vancouver. So that's gone. So it's virtual now. It's going to be a lot. I think it runs you $1 million, $1.2 million to run a regular election. This one's going to be a lot less expensive and probably more effective. It could open the door for voting for everybody who's a band member instead of just 633 people.
All right, Bruce, your expertise is always appreciated. That's APTN's Bruce Spence joining us.
Thank you.
It's time for one more short break, but still ahead, a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This was the view early in the evening for William Fowler along the northwest slope of House Mountain, located near Whitecourt, Alberta. That is just a stunning photo. Be sure to send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning in the east, 23 degrees in mix of sun and cloud in Halifax and 28 in Fredericton. 10 degrees in Nain and 30 degrees in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 23 degrees in rain in Quebec City and 18 in Val-d'Or. 30 degrees in rain in Peterborough and 30 in rain in Sarnia. 18 in a mix of sun and cloud in Wawa and 19 in Sioux Lookout. 18 in sun and cloud in Churchill and 20 degrees in sun in God's Lake. 22 in sun and cloud in Winnipeg and 21 in Dauphin. 20 degrees in rain in Saskatoon and 20 in Yorkton. 21 in a mix of sun and cloud in La Ronge and 23 in Stony Rapids. In the west, 24 in sun and cloud in Fort Chipewyan and 26 in Peace River. 22 in rain in Calgary and 26 in Lethbridge. 25 in sun and cloud in Vancouver and 30 in sun in Quesnel. 29 in sun in Smithers and 29 in Fort Nelson. 25 in a mix of sun and cloud in Whitehorse and 22 in Beaver Creek. 29 degrees in Wrigley and 30 in Norman Wells. 25 degrees in Colville Lake and 25 degrees in Fort McPherson. 18 in sun and cloud in Baker Lake and 20 in Chesterfield. 7 degrees in Clyde River and 8 degrees in Iqaluit. That's all the time we have for you on this edition of APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have a great night. We leave you tonight with scenes and with some of the sights, from the rallies on July 1st in Ottawa.